that you're attempting to reestablish on the North Coast?
Well, LaBranche, I agree with the last speaker. Some issues to bring up is, I looked at the Hess's conveyance on the, what he says. What it says is that property is for railroad use only. Also, it says in order to get rid of the railroad, the easement, railroad must be discontinued or abandoned. Neither of which has happened. And I have that in my backpack if you want to take a look. Something that, what's the cost of the trail going to be when we take the rail out, put the trail in, put the rail back in? What's the trail cost going to be then? Once everybody's getting on the road for their timeline, lack of timeline there, yet we don't have a timeline per option on the trail. What's the different timelines going to be? And I'd like to also see what the why the east side has not been looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hoff.
Chairman Hemphill, Jim Hoff, Eureka, California. I hadn't really planned to address your organization today on this topic, but after listening to the presentation, I felt compelled to do so. I do ride my bike between Eureka and Arcata a couple times a year, enjoy the ride, don't enjoy being next to the cars, and don't enjoy dodging the debris from the eucalyptus trees. So I can see the value of having a trail between Eureka and Arcata. But there is one issue that I didn't see anybody address today, and that is the issue of private property rights. My partner and I own approximately a half a mile of the railroad right-of-way between Eureka and Arcata. I recently had a reason to look at the document which was drafted in 1891, which allows the railroad to use that property for railroad purposes. And it's very specific. It doesn't allow any other use than railroad. So I think before things get too far along, there needs to be some mechanism for somebody to deal with the private property rights of those who own property between Eureka and Arcata. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but I think people need to recognize those rights. And also, if there is such a trail that goes across private property rights, I think there needs to be a mechanism to indemnify the private property owners against liability. So I think those two issues need to be dealt with before things get too far along. So again, thank you very much.
Melanie Williams, just 2 quick points. Thank you for your time. I live in Arcata and commute every day that I can to Eureka. Excuse me. And the real danger is, the current danger is the cars, not the future danger of the train. For what the distance is, for where do you feel safe? Do you feel safe next to a fast-moving train? Commuters, bicycle commuters are currently out there right next to fast-moving cars, and the distance is not protected. There is no fence, and we're right up against the traffic. So that's a very serious and current danger, not a future danger. We face it on a daily basis. My second request would just be clarification on the point that Mr. Hauser made. If indeed 12 years ago this board said that the NCRA line had been rail banked and authorized for use as a trail, those of us here in the community working on that would really love to see that document. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Rawl, I live in Arcata. I'm the volunteer executive director of Green Wheels. I'll just try to shorten this up just because we are running a little bit longer, but I did want to talk about rail banking and what I think are some misunderstandings about it. It's been viewed kind of by half the community as this sort of threat that rail banking is going to destroy the railroad, and that that's actually not really the perspective that I have. In my view, just from looking at the documents and looking at what the NCRA has out there in terms of their plans, the rail banking might actually be the best chance for the NCRA to save the right-of-way. There hasn't been train running now for 10 years on the tracks up here. You got to figure that Eel River EIR is going to take probably 4 to 5 years. Add in some delays. I just can't, it's hard to see rail service up here within, in less than 10 years. That's 20 years of no trains running on the tracks. And we've already had one property owner come up talking about, their concerns. As these easements revert back and we lose the right-of-way, the question is, if the mandate is to bring rail service back to the North Coast, if we lose the right-of-way, have we fulfilled our mandate? And that's just kind of a rhetorical question I leave for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, my name is Jen Rice, and I work for Redwood Community Action Agency, and I was part of the team that produced the feasibility study. And I've been coming to y'all, at least some of you, since I think it was '96 with Dan, working on these issues. So I appreciate your continued effort to consider these options. And there's just a couple things I just want to make some clarifications about, because obviously I could do a thesis about all the issues. But one thing I just wanted to mention, it's been brought up several times that other routes were not considered. And I have to admit, I take a little bit of offense at that, because I've been considering all those options for over a decade. And there are a couple of studies, I'll just hold them up, that do look at other routes. This one, done 10 years ago, looked at 7 different routes around the bay. And the first 2 meetings of this planning team, they asked me to go over in detail what were the constraints and opportunities of all those, and how did we come to look at between the bay and the highway as the optimal corridor. So that information exists. It was a more cursory study than this more expensive one. But and I just also wanted to note that your board approved a study of a consideration of a trail in the right-of-way on the Annie and Mary corridor 10 years ago. And actually 2 years ago approved a consideration of actual rail banking. Some recent findings have come up, and John's been working with the Friends of the Annie and Mary Rail Trail in detail that have shed more light on that process. That group is working very actively toward working with the City of Blue Lake and others. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that effort has been pursued as you have allowed consideration of what you have allowed, and it's on the fast track now. It's definitely moving forward, and John has been a big part of that effort. So I'll just keep it at that, and thanks for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. I see 2 more people, and that will have to draw to a close at this point. Sano.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for this chance to speak with you today. My name is Sano Madrone. I spent the last 23 years of my life working to build the Hammond Trail in McKinleyville. And that effort was done with the private landowners, number one, and with the county and the State Coastal Conservancy and many partners. And it was built on an abandoned right-of-way, railroad right-of-way. And I wonder how many of us today would think we shouldn't have done that. That right-of-way was so important for our commerce and our economy. I don't know, it really wasn't up there. Maybe it is in other places. But I just want to say I am a supporter of railroads, especially where they can be built in stable locations that don't drain taxpayers of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars over years and years. But just to give you an indication of my support for railroads, some 23 years ago I was the mayor pro tem of Blue Lake when this railroad was being abandoned by the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. And I was the only member of the city council at the time that voted against abandonment. It got abandoned. Eureka Southern ended up the owner. They then immediately sold all the beautiful timber along the right-of-way that was 100 years old. So for those of us who used to ride the train down the canyon and remember those beautiful groves that sustained fisheries and helped stabilize those slopes, that was the first thing that happened in abandonment was we stripped all of those assets off. At any rate, I just want to point out that the right-of-way is a right-of-way for public transportation. And if you can't build a railroad because of geology, because it takes too much money, that's a real factor you need to consider. I was asked professionally by the railroad about 15 years ago to take a ride down the canyon and assess the potential to rebuild the railroad and keep it open on an annual basis. I've been doing erosion control work professionally here on the North Coast for the last 35 years. My professional opinion is that it's $1 billion ticket or more, because you have to treat every one of those landslides as a river of rock, mud, and wood that they are. And you have to suspension bridge them if you hope to not be putting in another $300 million in 7 to 10 years. So it's an extremely expensive thing to do for very few jobs that might be created. Abandonment also is an issue of both legal, physical, and perception. Conflict of interest is a legal thing and a perception thing. What we have here is some potential abandonments that have occurred to several private parcels between Eureka and Arcata and Blue Lake. And I've looked at multiple deeds, including Peter Busman's, including the Breakup Lumber Company, and they all have a similar reversionary clause that you're all aware of, which says if the railroad fails to operate for a period of 2 years, the easement reverts. So that's a serious issue and a serious problem. Even if that's not a legal issue that you agree with, you must admit that physically you've abandoned the right-of-way. Maybe that wasn't your intention, but because of economics, you have abandoned the right-of-way. All you have to do is look at the tracks between Eureka and Arcata. Additionally, there is a perception by the public that you have abandoned it. I'm not saying that's been your intention. I think your intentions as board members has been to keep it open and rebuild it. But regardless, abandonment is very real, and you need to consider that. Additionally, it's also important that you note that all rails must have a trail for emergency access if there's a breakdown. And this was pointed out to me on my tour of the Old River Canyon, that a trail must be built with that rail if it's opened back up the Old River Canyon. So you have to have trails with rails. They may not be of Class 1 standard, but they need to be there. The last couple points I'll make is that HCOG recently had a vote. It was a split vote on the Caltrans study on the highway. And it was quite interesting to me to note that all of the communities, Arcata, Blue Lake, Trinidad, that were in the north area that can really relate to the Bay Trail that's being talked about, the piece of the Bay Trail being talked about, they voted to have Caltrans redo the study and look at a trail within the right-of-way, etc. The communities that voted against it aren't near that piece of trail. So if you expand your vision and honestly consider rails with trails that includes a true whole bay trail, you'll be looking at Eureka to Fortuna very quickly along the South Bay. And I guarantee you that as soon as you put that on the table, those communities will be voting with the northern communities because they will all see the benefit to them directly. That will shift things immediately. So you just need to broaden your vision, do what you can. Hammond Trail had to be built in fits and pieces that people complained about, but that's what was doable. You need to either build trail with rail now or put the trail on it. Otherwise, you've abandoned it and you have nothing. Thank you very much.
This will be the last person that I'll ask Mr. Williams, the operator, to comment on this as well.
Chairman Campbell and board members, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Kristen Lark, and I'm the Environmental Projects Director of Friends of Small Places. Our organization fully supports the trail concept. We'd like to see a trail there. We have lots of questions and are skeptical of the feasibility of the rail coming back for freight and or passenger service. We'd like to see some of those questions answered. I just had some quick comments on some of the things the speakers brought up. There was a lot of talk in this room today about Caltrans. Unfortunately, I didn't see anybody here from Caltrans to address any of those. And in particular, the Safety Corridor Project. And I just wanted to point out that the purpose and need of that project, as I understand it, is for vehicle safety. It has to do with the median crossings and safety issues for vehicles. The rail and trail issue is outside the scope of that project. And really, that needs to be a new project to be brought forward. And if there's a real potential for the Safety Corridor Project to be killed if this continues to go forward in this manner. I'd like to see the project go forward, the rail as a vehicle safety project and a new project product. Also, there was a comment about inertia, and I think this room shows that there's not inertia anymore about the trail, and I think that there's a lot of interest in moving forward. Also, there was a mention of lead agency designation for CEQA, and I was very interested in that. I would like to see either JPA or some agency come forward for lead agency designation so that we can get the CEQA process started, because we all know that's time consuming, and that will answer some of these other questions that aren't covered in the feasibility study. And my last comment is that Mr. Hauser mentioned the Annie Mary Trail, and I would think that the folks out in Blue Lake, Tina Eiper and Ingrid Kozak, would take offense to the fact that nothing has happened with that trail. As Jen mentioned, that group has been working very diligently to raise money and to move forward, and they just need some extra support. They could use support from the NCRA, they could use support from the community, and they would be more than happy to get that. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, I'd like to, Kay, can you just make one comment, please?
Yeah, that's all I asked. Well, John, if you would let me go ahead. I just wanted to let you know that we do and continually have supported the Marcus and the Timber Heritage Association. I like the idea of option 1. I would like more study of the east side of the highway for the trail. I think it's important to take find out for sure about property rights. We do not want to lose the property rights along the right-of-way for either the right-of-way or an eventual trail.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and I'm glad you got all these people here today.
Yes, it's been good. Thank you. Mr. Williams, the operator.
Yes, I'm John Williams, and I'm president of Northwestern Pacific Railroad Company, the contract operator of the railroad. I neither favor nor oppose this trail proposal. We've received a lot of them, and I have helped evaluate them during my career. There are 4 considerations I think the board has to think about, though, as you consider this or any other trail proposal. Number 1 is safety. The setback shown in most of these slides has been 8 feet 6 inches from the center line of the track. That means your people are 6 feet away from a moving train. This railroad historically has been operated at 25 miles an hour, some at 40 miles an hour. And if this particular segment were operated at 40, the setback is far inadequate. The ultimate authority on safety is the California PUC. When a plan is put together and presented that's acceptable to the railroad, then the PUC also has a vote. The second consideration is liability. That the introduction of a trail with inadequate setbacks from the operating railroad does create liability. There are pieces that fall off trains, and sometimes trains do come off the track, and so the question is who pays. The third issue is capacity. This is a narrow corridor, as is much of the right-of-way north of South Fork. And if you put a trail on, you're eliminating capacity to have a second track or a siding. I noticed the report said that the unused siding near Eureka could be converted to a trail. That was a used siding when the railroad was operating, so you can't just take it away if you intend to have operations. And last, as I've said to the board before with trail proposals, I entered into a long-term lease. I've invested a substantial amount of money, my company and I have. And I think you have to be sure what your legal rights are. I can assure you I'll see what my legal rights are under the lease agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Okay, that concludes the public testimony. I would bring it back to the board. I suggested in the memo that we think about whatever direction we may want to provide for staff and for this board to consider. We've heard a lot of suggestions. I guess number 1 is I don't think we've moved away from our earlier commitment to work with trail planning groups. I don't think that's before us at all at this time and place. I don't think we have in front of us any specific proposal that we could put before us to take a vote on. I do believe that some of the concerns I have were mentioned by Mr. Williams that need to be put into the mix for consideration. And I think getting the groups that, the public entities that have land use responsibilities in each of these areas do try to meet and come up with an overall approach that they can see that can help the planning group move forward. And I believe that kind of grouping will start taking place tomorrow with the meeting that I've pulled together. There's probably a couple other things involved with that, but I think for my standpoint at this time, those are the comments we can reasonably make. But keep this in front of us as an issue, especially as we come up here every so often, I don't know what the monthly tour is for up here, but it might have changed now. We have Ada Marin sisters and brothers down there. So anyway, that's my comment. To lead it off, I'll turn it to Director Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would concur with your comments. I think, as I previously stated, I think it's incumbent on us to, as a significant property owner in this region, to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the different government agencies and organizations and HCOG as they move forward with their plans. And I think keeping the kind of questions that not only our operator brought up, but also that you brought up in front of all of those groups is critical. And I just suggest to staff that we not only participate in those meetings, as obviously they are tomorrow, but also bring back to this board whatever the particular findings are as it relates to that. I will say, at least from my perspective, I don't foresee that the NCRA would in any way be a lead agency on a particular trail creation. I do suspect that as that kind of conversation goes forward, that we'll be, as a property owner, a participant in those conversations. And I do appreciate the opportunity to, after being up here a few times and hearing sort of, for want of a better term, ad hoc comments, and knowing that this study was going forward, the opportunity to have a formalized presentation from the planning group, a CD copy of it for my own use, and have an opportunity to have the public provide their comments. And I do appreciate that opportunity. I'm glad that we took it, and expect that we'll have that as this issue moves forward.
Thank you, Director McDonald.
I just want to make a few comments. First, I'm encouraged by and noted the broad support of the public, and I'm sure John, you noticed it too. And I'm encouraged by what I perceive as a high probability of success. I think one member of the public said, I caught on to share the road or share the right of way. I don't think we want to be obstructionists in this. I don't think we intend to be, and I think even though we won't have a formal motion today, I would like us to give them the sense that we're going to be very supportive of this project. One of the things is, and I will say, I would support option number one. And in fact, if I hear correctly, maybe there's some possibility of option number one with a short-term, whether we call it rail banking, that's probably an inappropriate term from what I heard. Maybe we should rename that to rail loaning or something like that. But if there's some way that we can accelerate the process by maybe rail loaning on parts of it while we're pursuing option one, some combination of option one and option four might be feasible. On the other hand, I sense that there might be some problems of having to go through 2 rounds of CEQA on that or something. There might be some problems with doing that. Lastly, there was one part, and I shouldn't really make this my last comment, but it's the only one I don't have any on this, is that one of the things that I heard from, I think it was the mayor of Arcata, is a little troubling to me about in essence, the railroad is the de facto dike, or whatever we want to call it, breakwater. And I think we should, and maybe we already have, but that tweaked me a little bit to say we better make sure we're maintaining that or doing something with it. I'm not sure it really relates that much to rails and trails, but that was a concern to me.
Anyone else? There's a comment. Yes, Director Clark.
I concur with all of the director's comments. It seems to me that there were 2 legal questions raised, and that while the folks tomorrow might be going ahead, we should as well consider 2 things. One is, perhaps in closed session, hear from our counsel as to whether we have in fact abandoned some portions of the rail. And secondly, I was surprised to hear that what we may be engaged in might otherwise create legal problems. So, for example, from Mr. Williams as well as Mr. Huff, and we better look at that before we come to some final conclusion.
Anything else, sir?
Last comment, and I concur exactly with Bernie on his comments regarding the potential legal liability there. That's certainly a concern. And maybe before, it certainly seems premature at this point to make any recommendation, given those unknowns that sit out there. And the last one is a response from PUC, if indeed they are the ones who make a determination of what the safety parameters are, and we have to abide by whatever those decisions or parameters are. We certainly can't step forward until we have that guidance.
Okay, I'll turn it over to our chairman, Mr. Hinkle.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks to everybody.
Excuse me, Alan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, you're way down there in the corner. We can't even see you.
I am,
Is your mic on?
certainly no lights on, so no power down this end of the, so this is where the staff sits up here in Humboldt, huh? Down in, okay, Mendocino, we treat our people better, maybe. That's why it's so easy to hire people down there. Right. You know, I support it. I think it's terrific to be able to observe the enthusiasm and the energy and the work, the detailed work that's been done. And apparently there's been work done by people going way back. I'm really impressed by this. I also sit as a representative from Mendocino County, supervisorial member from Mendocino County. And one of the reasons I represent the coast primarily, although my district extends all the way over to Lake County. I'm inland, I'm bi-coastal, or whatever. I'm a hybrid. The thing that strikes me about this is when we hear such terrific presentation like this, and I wish we had this kind of energy on issues other than marijuana. In Mendocino County, it seems marijuana is our major economic engine down there. I'll stay away from that. But the reason I'm leading into this, I wanted first, the reason I'm taking so long to make this preface is I'm the supervisor who represents Mendocino County because a big chunk of this railroad goes through the district to which we have a supervisor who's adamantly opposed to further activity to get this railroad going. And I think there's no secret about it. We're good friends in some ways. We're at each other's throat in other ways, in a funny kind of way. But what I'm very, very, very aware of is the level, the magnitude of the task before this body to get done what it has before us. And while I love what you're doing here, and while I love the support being showed here, my feeling is here as a consultant in my prior life and having run all kinds of projects, this body here, if I were to be advising a group or talking with a number of stakeholders in some sort of collaborative and taking on a task where you have an agency that has a major set of jobs to do and get done, and is operating, at least in my district, in kind of a hostile environment, there's no other way to put it, that can be countered. I'm positive in my thinking. It can be countered, and when we look at this whole set of problems we have before us, all I would caution, there's a lot going on and on about this is not the body to turn to take on the task that you folks, and again, we folks, who support trails and environmental activities and are environmentalists and are also interested in economic development. Please do not burden our staff. Please don't burden our members with the job of becoming stakeholders or leaders in this project. I haven't conferred with John about this, John Woolley. He probably has pulled me aside later and say, how in the hell, why you said this, where are you going? But a huge dose of realism in the face of what this railroad has had to deal with to get where it is now. I came on board just a year ago because I felt that I really could help move things along. And the point I think we have to be able to do, the thing we have to do here is work together. But the energy comes from folks sitting out there in your organizations, and we're the overburdened elephant in your room, if you will. Overburdened with obligations, overburdened with perceptions, positive and negative, and overburdened with a huge task of just doing the technical things. And John Williams has just run through a number of things. There are technical issues. So, if you can work together with this group, but please do not, my take on it is one person speaking here, but I would not want to walk out of here saying, boy, we're really going to make this one of our major issues here. I think what it is one of many issues we have to deal with, and this is one of the more pleasant ones. And I think if we can keep it that way, but please do not look to this group as even, somebody mentioned lead agency. Not even a lead agency. I wouldn't even think it would be in the first row of people who march down that trail on the day we celebrate the trail being put together. I'd say we probably third tier. Okay. Sort of like John Edwards, great rhetoric, but whatever. But I'm trying to put it in perspective here because, once again, I know what the job has been for the people. We've gotten it this far, and I apologize for extending us into the discussion once again. But I've been sitting down here in darkness, so maybe I'm kind of moldy.
Thank you. That's more than we've heard from you in a long time. Ever. Well, thank you again to everybody with their input. We're going to take a short break here in a minute or so for some of these old guys up here. But before we do that, an issue has come up a couple times. It's come up in the press, and it came up here today. And I've had some discussion with council. And Chris, if you're comfortable, I'd like you to just quickly respond to the question of whether we've abandoned the railroad or not, just in the broad context of what that process is, so there's clarity to this.
Well, for railroads all across the state, this has always been an issue as to whether there's a lot of deeds that will have reversion clauses in them. Under the eyes of precedent that is in effect, a railroad is in operation for so long as it's not abandoned in the technical legal sense. Abandonment occurs when you go to the Surface Transportation Board, which is the successor agency to the Interstate Commerce Commission, and apply for permission to abandon. And after a public and process, a due process, a decision is made. And if the STB authorizes abandonment, that becomes abandonment. This principle has been recognized most recently in a California Supreme Court case in 1990 involving the Napa wine train. And it very clearly stated that the reversion clause does not apply to an active railroad. And with the exception of the Annie and Mary, which is an unusual exception, all of our railroad is currently viewed as an active railroad by the Surface Transportation Board.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we'll leave the other question of the issue of additional uses beyond rail for further discussion and investigation as part of the overall process that's going to have to go forward here. I just want to kind of reiterate one thing. We went on record, as was noted earlier, in support of investigation of this and in conceptual support of the concept of assisting the rail people. And I don't sense that anything has changed here on this board in terms of that support to answer the question of whether we're anyplace else, regardless of the complexion of this board. Unless any of the directors have a contrary feeling, this is not an action item, but I think we can state the sense of the board, based on the comments you've heard here today, is supportive, of course, subject to the same provisions that we set, that we not compromise our primary mission as an agency with state-mandated responsibility to preserve and enhance the railroad transportation. So I hope I've stated that clearly. If any single director here disagrees with me, that's the way we'll let the record stand at this point in time. I encourage John and the group to sharpen the focus on this. I think there have been some questions asked and some requests for further clarity, both in what the NCRA is doing and what the trail people are doing. From the NCRA standpoint, we'll be submitting a new business plan to the CTC as part of our ongoing communication with them at the February meeting, I believe, Mitch. And a lot of these dog-eared old projections that have been floating around for much too long without formal revision will be updated at that point in time, along with input from our operator who will present his private sector portion of that. So we'll be here to discuss the Proposition 1B application after we take a break. We encourage any of you who would like to be involved in that, do it. It's an exciting concept, and it directly relates to what's going on right here in our backyard. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 20 minutes to 2. Thank you.
Don't burn the grill. We're going to stare for it? Oh, yeah.
We only have one minute.
He has followed your
I'm wondering,
There's your map.
So you uploaded the new video then? Yeah, just like this, you have a USB interface, and I have a USB in there, and you also have documents wireless. Yeah. How about if you tried using, do you have any better import options for the Final Cut? Also try. Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. The newer traffic made a lot of sense. Like when I upgraded the timer, I was thinking I was really pleased with but there might be a bit of a
Some of these residents something we don't probably
I want to reconvene the meeting if we can get the directors up here. Somebody see if Director Woolley's out there somewhere politicking or? Yeah, he was up for election. Sure.
Not out here.
He's not there? All right, we're going to have to start TV interviews notwithstanding. We're now under conduct of business, and over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of activity for a joint application under Proposition 1B for some harbor improvements and the Humboldt Bay short line, which has been discussed at various points, but never any action taken upon. I'm going to let Mitch introduce the subject. Some of our own directors need to be brought up to date on this, and it's an action item. So, Mitch, if you could introduce it, and then John Williams, our operator, has a schedule, so we're going to let him speak to this subject as soon as you've introduced it. So, Mitch, do you want to describe the project and what we're doing tactically here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, in November of 2006, Proposition 1B was approved by the voters, which created something the state is calling the Trade Corridors Improvement Fund. These are funds to be allocated by the California Transportation Commission for improvements to freight rail systems and for port capacity and efficiency projects throughout the state. The CTC has now, after some delay, developed selection criteria guidelines for the distribution of these funds under this program and have set an initial application grant deadline for prospective applicants of January 17th, so we're on quite a short fuse right now. In anticipation of this funding opportunity, last May, the Humboldt Harbor District Board of Commissioners and the NCRA Board directed staff to begin developing a joint application for funding under this program. With the establishment of the eligibility guidelines finally in November, we were left with, as I say, a relatively short time frame to finalize an application and get it before you for consideration prior to the January 17 deadline. So what you have before you is an application which we have called the Northern Freight Corridor Restoration Project. It includes a rail component which is intended to restore rail service along the NWP corridor from Samoa to South Fork. This approximately 64-mile short line would receive, under our application, would receive a total of $15.1 million in Proposition 1B funds, and there would be a required 50% match of $15.1 million in matching funds as a requirement of the application. The port component would include about $4 million in Proposition 1B funds with similarly a $4 million match. The purpose of the port portion, which I will let the port describe in detail at the appropriate time, is to minimize something called shoaling at the entrance of Humboldt Bay. If this application is approved by the CTC, we estimate that the environmental documentation and engineering could take about a year, and that the construction could begin sometime possibly in the fall of 2009. With that, the guts of this, of course, is the operational questions, which I hope John can discuss with us.
Thank you, Mitch. And maybe we can kind of hold the questions to get John up here and then double back on those to Mitch. John, would you like to speak to this?
Well, we have discussed the short line concept for many years, and And I believe there's enough traffic up here that over time can be developed into a profitable railroad, working in conjunction with the port. And for that reason, we're willing to consider taking on a $15 million loan that would fund half the rehabilitation of the railroad. I think the economics will work on that basis. I don't know if there what operational questions, if any, the board has, but that's pretty much how I see it.
Thank you, Will. We'll open, John, up to questions from the board first.
One question is, the $15 million loan you'd be taking on, that would be, NWP company would be the borrower?
Probably. Could be NCRA or NWPCO. I've operated under the assumption that the NWPCO.
Would we, this is a very important question, would we, even if NWP was borrowing the money, would we be asked to be a guarantor or in any way? And then, I guess, either for you or for Chris, what's our potential liability on that?
Well, I think that probably my credit's better than yours.
That's an understatement.
Are you talking about me personally, or? Which I probably is.
My credit, NWPCO's credit's better than NCRA's. I think that's an issue to be discussed and determined talking to the Federal Railroad Administration. But I'm expecting that the loan will be in our name.
You mentioned developing product over time, and I know in the proposal it says that it mentions, I think, 6,000 cars. Can you give us any idea what that is, who the customers would be, what the product would be?
No, I can't, Director. At this point in time, I haven't done a detailed business plan. What I customarily do is see if the state's inclined to fund its half of this project, and then we'd see if FRA is also willing to grant a loan on a tentative basis, and then I would do a detailed business plan that involves shipper interviews, shipper commitments, shipper contracts even. But I have not done that at this point in time.
Can I be so bold as to ask how we came up with the 6,000 carload number?
Sure, I have talked to shippers up here. I have an idea of the traffic that can be generated in this area, and that's where the number came from.
Thank you.
Director Myers?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, thank you. Part of the memo that supports the application says that this will assist shippers in the Central Valley. And I don't understand how that can be. I don't see where this segment from Samoa to Southport is going to assist the Central Valley. So could you let me know, please, how that's going to occur?
Well, I think that probably was a piece that should have been deleted. Conceptually, it's the interface here in the Eureka Arcata area will be rail to barge or barge to rail, and whether it's viable to go rail to the port and then barge down to a place like Stockton or something like that, and then rail to destination. It's a detailed economic analysis that has to be done to make sure that the numbers all work because of the extra handling. But conceivably, it's entirely possible.
Thank you.
Any other directors?
Mr. Chairman, just under the concept of this application, do we have any idea what the decision time frame would be by the CTC?
Director Kelly, they do have a time frame. We do have an idea. I don't have that schedule in front of me right now. My recollection is sometime in July of this year, late summer, they're going to start making project selections.
Chairs, I think we have somebody here from
Rosetta from the Minnesota COG, and I have the schedule. The CPC is scheduled to make decisions this April. Very short term.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a decision for allocation, and then is there conceived that then there would be follow-up paperwork? Let's say we got the allocation or decided that we would be granted the funds, that would then require a follow-up to CTC, or?
Yeah, it sounds like Loretta has the schedule there. If the CTC expresses interest, there'll be a whole back and forth and dialogue that goes on.
And then that's when, obviously, the operator would have to go and see at this point if we could get the loan from FRA, put the business plan together, and get all that stuff adopted by CTC for the final allocation to proceed with the project.
That's exactly right, Director Kelly. We, as I say, are under enormous pressure to get an application in by the 17th.
And the other component is that this application, as it relates to this, I mean, my presumption is that another economically viable component of a short line is, as we've heard before, even excursion trains and other components, and this would obviously help that effort, I would suspect.
Yes, you're correct, Director Kelly. I look forward to working with Marcus and the THA on the excursion train service. As you probably know from listening to me before, it's important that the quality of the track be acceptable to the Federal Railroad Administration before we consider excursion train service. But we've run excursion trains up here. We even made a little money on it. I was executive director, and I think we can do it again.
Right, I do too. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know who to direct my question to, maybe it's to you, John, but the staff. In the earlier discussion, we had some discussion around basically the levee between Arcata and Eureka being very important due to sea rise potentials that are being measured and being discussed, in fact, by other agencies as we speak. And I can envision that in fact, you can note it when you drive along 101, and at a high tide, you're actually, I think, and Dave Anderson has noticed this as well, you're actually below the water line. It's sometimes on a visual pathway when you look out to the bay from the highway. So the levee does provide a very important safety concern, I think, both to Caltrans and to the neighboring property owners for the very purpose we're talking about. Additionally, we heard earlier too, maybe there's a way that we can incorporate some of the trail issues in somehow. And I don't mean to say that this application would have to pay for that. In fact, I would think that if we even got around to hinting that in the application, it probably would be the death knell of it, because again, it's for freight purposes only. But at the same time, it would provide perhaps matching resources to other sources, if awarded, that may help with whatever we can design that's commensurate with this board's interests. I'm not asking that question, because I know that's a larger question, but I am concerned about how we make sure the statement about the levee is not only crucial for freight, but also for protection of resources, Caltrans being one of them as well. Could that be in the proposal, or do you think that would be a problem as well?
Well, I certainly subscribe to your concept, Director Woolley. The railroad embankment has served that purpose for years and years and years, and that's why you have riprap on the water side, big pieces of rock to keep the erosion minimized. So I think in the reconstruction or rehabilitation repair of the railroad, I think that part of the embankment has to be redone also. I don't know that it's appropriate for a corridor or a transportation corridor application, though, to put in the comments about it serving as protection for property owners. I